Guys, my top 10 scariest horror movies was one of the most successful videos I've had in a while. Thank you guys for watching that. And I want to do not one, but two more lists for you guys, okay? So let's kick it off with top 10 scariest horror part 2. Let's do this. What is up, guys? Welcome to another top 10. Like I said in the intro, my last top 10, the scariest horror. You guys really love scary horror top 10 lists. Who wouldn't? But man, you guys are so freaking passionate. Like some of those comments, man, they get pretty heated. They're like, "How could you not include X movie?" And I'm just like, "It's my list, man." And plus, like comedy, scares are really subjective, and some of you were mentioning movies that scared the crap out of you when you were a kid and they did nothing for me. It happens, and vice versa. So don't get so bent out of shape on these freaking lists, people, okay? Jesus, I'm trying here. I did get some ideas from you guys. I don't have the best memory, and sometimes these movies pop out at me that I'm like, oh, I see, yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that one. So a couple of these will be ones that you guys might have reminded me, and then I found a whole bunch of others that just kind of popped in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I got to mention that too. So I got, well over 20 movies here, so I figured I'd split it in half. I'm gonna give you two lists, okay? So in this list, I'm going to give you one honorable mention, and then the next list, I'm going to give you one honorable mention there too. All right, enough of my blabbering, so let's get on to the countdown. Okay, so for my honorable mention, I'm going to go with Starry Eyes, and I like to mention a movie that not everybody has seen, even horror fans, and I can't recommend Starry Eyes enough if you want a good, scary movie. And I like this one too because it focuses on like Hollywood and being a young actor or actress and just trying to make it. And that's basically what it's about. This main character of the movie, she's trying to be a successful actress. And there's a lot of head games there, and you're gonna see a lot of like social issues throughout this movie, just trying to fit in. But then this turns into something really dark. And I guess she goes to the wrong casting agency that's involved in this like satanic cult. If you like Cronenberg, body transformation types of films mixed with some satanic stuff, then look no further than Starry Eyes. And I will say this third act is probably one of the scariest, creepiest third acts I've seen in quite a few years. Okay, number 10, I'm gonna go with the original Friday the 13th because I remember a lot of people when they saw that movie the first time, back in the day when it came out. There's a reason this movie was so successful. Yeah, Tom Savini's kills are great, but it was a scary movie. And these kills felt very real to people. And the final act, the big reveal, spoiler alert, but Pamela Voorhees being the killer, Betsy Palmer's performance was really creepy. And I've always said that I find her performance even scarier than Jason because Jason doesn't even talk. But this is, a person that gives off a performance and goes a little bit more and more crazy, and we don't even see her until that final act. So her performance starts off nice and calm, nice, sweet old lady. And by the end, she's getting her head chopped off. But some really scary stuff. And can't not forget that freaking, let's go ahead and say, one of the greatest jump scares ever filmed with young Jason jumping out of the lake. That scared the crap out of everybody. And by the way, I just showed this movie to my wife last night for the very first time, and she dug it. Number 9, Paranormal Activity. And a few of you actually mentioned this one because I mentioned the Blair Witch. And I guess I forgot about Paranormal Activity, but also I didn't want to put too many found footage movies in the list. But Paranormal Activity is very effective, actually. It got me. And it's hard for a found footage movie to get me, especially if you remember when this movie came out, there were so many found footage movies anyway after Blair Witch. So to make one that actually still worked, and I always think, the suburban, just in a normal house, if you take something like that that's not scary at all and you add this evil element or entity to it and some good shadows and all that stuff, to me that stuff scares me more because it's just so close to home. And the final act in this movie, how they pulled off a lot of those, those scares and those camera tricks and all that stuff, it felt real. And I think that's what you want in a found footage movie. You want it to feel like your next door neighbor could have filmed it. And to give it a leg up on Blair Witch, we went into this knowing that this wasn't real. And it still was very effective. I'd say putting both movies side by side, Paranormal Activity is actually scarier than Blair Witch. Number 8, Pet Sematary. This is no surprise to anybody. Anybody that saw Pet Sematary when it first came out, it's a Stephen King movie. Stephen King has written so many stories that really just get under your skin. And when you involve children and you know, families and all that, I think when you involve families, it just gets closer to home. And seeing this little toddler, you know, being buried, even before he came back, I remember watching the movie and just thinking, man, when he does come back, it's gonna be creepy. It's gonna be really scary, because I have this thing like seeing little kids being evil. That's like scarier than adults being evil to me. And that's what we got with Gage. When Gage came back, and he's still saying these cherubic types of things, you know, sounding like a child, but doing these evil things, you know, like cutting the Achilles tendon of Fred Gwynn, just all that crazy stuff. Really, that last act is just super creepy. And then with the wife coming in at the very end, man, at that point, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I didn't even mention Zelda. If that doesn't make you lose sleep at night, I don't know what will. Number 7, The Fog. John Carpenter's The Fog. I didn't want to put too many John Carpenter movies on the last list, so I can put them here. The Fog is definitely a scary movie. And what's interesting about it is a lot of those scares weren't in the original film. And Carpenter went back in post and added a lot of those scares, you know, the intrusion shots and all that stuff. But really just that last act too, when you have Adrienne Barbeau up at the top of the lighthouse, you know, fighting for her life. A lot of that stuff was shot after the fact. This one always scares me because of the atmosphere in it. And if you want atmosphere, you go straight to Carpenter. Don't look any other direction, because the guy is just a master of atmosphere in movies. And I like a ghost story where the ghosts feel real, like you could reach out and touch them, and worse off, they could reach out and touch you. And that's how the ghosts feel in The Fog. I mean, we see that on screen. It's not like a psychological element as much as it is an actual physical element. Plus, visually, just seeing this fog roll through the screen, and you know, that just adds more to the mystery, because you don't know what could be inside that fog. And there's a few scenes like that where we see the ghost just come into the frame outside of the fog, and it's just even creepier. It's just more ways to create scares. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Now, I'm looking at my list here. I'm going to shift some things around here, okay? Because this movie right here has definitely got to go up higher. All right? So let me fix this. Hold on. Okay, I'm good now. Number 6 is going to be another one that you probably are going to be surprised by. Blackcoat's Daughter. And this is definitely a polarizing type of film. There were people that didn't really like this movie because it is a slow burner. It's slow paced. But it is one of those movies that has some nice surprises in it, some great atmosphere. And the final act has a nice twist that I didn't see coming, but really it's not the twist that scares me, it's just the performances, you know, these evil, demon-like performances that we get out of our main characters. I'm not going to spoil this particular movie because there's a lot of people that have not seen Blackcoat's Daughter, but I will say what happens in the final act really sent shivers down my spine. There were moments that were extremely unsettling. And if I could shine a light on the 2 main actresses of this movie, Emma Roberts and Kiernan Shipka, those 2 actresses are what drove it home in the end and really made this movie as scary as it was. And it's not a movie that you can watch over and over, kind of like The Exorcist. You know, there's definitely some really dark elements to this movie that you need to process after you watch it, but it definitely sits with you. Number 5, The Shining. This is a movie that I forgot for some reason to put on the last list. But my last list was pretty stacked, and you know, I figured I'd leave The Shining out because everybody mentions The Shining, but I will definitely put it on this list. You all know why The Shining is so effective. Big part of it is Jack Nicholson's performance and how he just slowly descends into madness, but really also Kubrick's direction in this movie. You know, he did a lot of intentional things with the camera in this movie to really make you feel uneasy. A lot of imagery in this movie that's kind of abstract. if I'm being honest. And this is one of those movies that is a slow burn type of movie. But for me, if this makes sense, I don't know, but it's one of those slow burn movies that I can just chew up every scene in it, you know? Certain movies like that, I don't find boring at all. And I don't find The Shining boring at all. Because I just like watching this family, not just Jack Nicholson, but also Shelley Duvall's performance. It's just very powerful stuff. And knowing what she went through behind the scenes with Stanley Kubrick and all that pressure on her. But in the end, it's just a really unsettling and scary movie. Number 4, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Out of all of his Living Dead movies, Night of the Living Dead, I think, is by far the scariest. I mean, Dawn is brilliant, but I don't find Dawn nearly as scary as Night. And maybe the black and white aesthetic adds to that. The score is extremely effective. Like, I don't think you could capture that feeling of an impending doom like what the score of Night of the Living Dead does. It accomplishes a lot, and it's perfect for a zombie type of film. It almost feels like the score itself is walking slowly towards you and you can't stop it. It's like an unstoppable force. But also, this is one of those movies that you just feel there's no way this is going to end well. This is going to end horribly, and it does. And just because of how bad it ends, it makes it even more creepy. Number 3, Suspiria. I think Dario Argento just has a beautiful way of handling horror. You know, I mean, you can get down and dirty with creating your scares, but Argento, that's not enough for him. He likes to really dazzle you with the visuals. It's almost like a painting. That's what Suspiria is. And there's these really nasty scenes of violence that are just sprinkled over that painting. That's the best way I could describe it. But that opening death scene with the hanging, automatically you feel uneasy with this movie, and it just started. Also, this is one of those movies that deals with witchcraft, and witchcraft movies always kind of get under my skin. And Goblin's score, there's a few tracks in Goblin's score for this movie that are extremely effective. Especially the one where it's just like chanting witch over and over. You know, this is one of those movies that doesn't let up. And maybe that's one thing I love about Italian horror too. It's just so unpredictable. It thinks outside the box. And every time I watch an Italian horror film, I'm surprised, you know? They all kind of fit in the same wheelhouse, but man, do they experiment, you know? And Suspiria is definitely one of the most experimental films, and because of that, I think it makes it even scarier. Number 2, Black Christmas. And this was my number 1, and I switched it. And I'll explain that in a minute. But Black Christmas is a movie that I didn't see until like the 90s. I first heard about this movie on the 25 Years of Terror doc for Halloween. But man, Bob Clark really knew how to create an atmosphere that was extremely chilling. And speaking of chilling, this movie takes place in the dead of winter. And it's another one of those movies that it just feels cold when you watch it. I don't know why. You can see the breath, you know. To me, that's just more production value. When you see the breath of the actors and you can see how cold they are. But then you got Billy, this completely deranged killer that's actually in the house throughout the whole movie. And you know, you got these like really obscene and disgusting phone calls to these girls. And also the score, you know, I keep mentioning scores, but for me, music is just so important when it comes to scaring an audience. And to have this really organic sounding score with these organ strings that sound like they're being beaten to death, it just adds to the atmosphere. But Black Christmas has quickly become like one of my all-time favorite films. To this day, it's still very unique. It definitely feels 70s, which I love about it. This doesn't feel like an 80s slasher at all. It feels full-on 70s. You know, the 70s had more of a gritty, grimy atmosphere as opposed to the 80s. And I love both decades almost equally, but I'm glad that they're different. They have a different feel to them. Okay, number 1. I'll go ahead and say it. It's Halloween 4. Let me explain myself. This is a very personal list for me. And I wanted to give you guys the movie that in my life has scared me more than any other movie. And that is Halloween 4. And of course, there's a story behind that. You know, this is the movie that made me obsessed with the franchise. And it's because of how afraid I was after watching it. I remember seeing it opening night in the theater back in '88. And it was a ride. The whole movie was a ride. The atmosphere throughout was great. That opening scene. As soon as Myers entered the frame, you know, when he's got the bandage around his head, like that bandage back there, H88 The Rap. To me, by this point, I had been kind of consumed with the character before I even saw part 4, because I started doing like research on the character. And then the way he was portrayed on screen in this movie, it just felt like the embodiment of evil. Even his hand like falling out of the gurney when she's taking his blood pressure. I jumped. This movie just got to me. So by the end of the movie, when we think we've finally gotten rid of the evil, and then Donald Pleasance comes up those stairs and he just starts screaming. I just remember I've never been scared like that in my entire life. Still to this day, I've never been scared like after watching Halloween 4. And so I have to put it on this list, even though, yeah, there are better movies on this list, but that movie is my scare. We all have that one movie that scared us more than every other movie that we've seen. I hope we do. This is my movie. This is the movie that I lost sleep literally over this movie for weeks, months, even years. Nightmares about Myers because of Halloween 4. So I have to give it number 1, don't I? I mean, because it's my movie that scared me. And your list, the movie that should be your number 1 is the movie that scared you the most out of your entire life. That's what's so fun about scary movie lists. Everybody's list is going to be different. But Halloween 4 is my number 1. You know, I wanted this to be number 1 because I'd be lying to myself if it wasn't. Physically, this is number 1 for me. So anyway, guys, that's it. My top 10 scariest horror movies, part 2. Part 3 is coming. Also, my wife came up with this idea, top 10 dance scenes in horror, which is gonna be so fun. Post in the comments your favorites, let me know. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.